There are many types of movies, but probably the most common is narrative. A narrative film can be further broken down into subsections called genres. A genre refers to the categorization of narrative films by the stories they tell and the ways they tell them. These genres are usually limited to gangster films, film noir, science fiction, horror, the western, and the musical. But we're going to be focusing on the western and more specifically Arthur Penn's film Little Big Man. Little Big Man is a great way of looking at the western genre because it covers every typical characteristic associated with the genre. It uses the typical western theme of civilization and wilderness. It occurs in the typical western settings, and it contains all of the distinguishable character types such as the orphan, the Indian, the immoral businessman, the gunslinger, the widow, the drunk, and the fallen woman. What's interesting is that Dustin Hoffman becomes almost every single one of these character types.
Between 1858 and 1878, Jack Crabb was an Indian warrior, a preacher's ward, a gunfighter, a drunkard, a hermit, and he tried to kill General Custer.
Take him away and hang him.
This brings up our next point of why this film is not fully a conventional western. This is mostly due to its presentation style. Most westerns have the classic story of a cowboy or someone from civilization rescuing a damsel in distress from the untamed wilderness, where dangers lurk at every corner, typically a result of the Indians. However, this is not the case of Little Big Man. This film intentionally flipped the western genre on its head and really began to think about how this well-known genre could be reworked. As a result, this film looks at everything backwards compared to how other traditional westerns look. Whereas most westerns looked at the wilderness and Native Americans as savage and needing to be tamed, the film Little Big Man decided to look from the perspective that the Americans and civilization were deranged and savage. This is primarily due to the time period in which this film was made. Little Big Man came out during the height of the Vietnam War and in the midst of the counterculture movement. At this time, there was a lot of controversy surrounding America's involvement in the war, and people questioned America's methods of attack against the innocent. This gave way to films portraying America in a different light. For instance, the attacks by Custer and his men in this film were to show the brutal attacks by America against the Vietnamese. There were many films that came out around this time and did something very similar. The original Star Wars trilogy is a great example of this. At first glance, one may think that Little Big Man and Star Wars have almost nothing in common, but this is actually not true. One thing that these two have in common is that they are both unconventional westerns. Now, most people would probably say that Star Wars is science fiction and that is not actually a western, but at closer examination, it does fit the western themes of civilization and wilderness, and it has many traditional character types, such as the orphan, a gunslinger, a damsel in distress, and tribespeople. The Star Wars films just took a different look at the western, like Little Big Man, and changed the setting. Also, Star Wars is very much influenced by the Vietnam War as well. In George Lucas and the Making of Star Wars, George Lucas says that he was influenced by the human side of the war and the fact that here was a great nation with all this technology which was losing a war to basically tribesmen. This is most clearly identified in the Ewok fight scene. Little Big Man's unconventional western style was largely a factor of director Arthur Penn, who was known to make very graphic films such as one of his most famous films, Bonnie and Clyde. However, due to the unconventional nature of the film and the intentional controversial aspects of portraying Americans as the villains, the film was not received well. As a result, the film did not do well financially, and Penn did not make many more films in his career. However, although at the time the film was not received well, it is now very much respected, along with the determination Penn had to have to make such a challenging and unique film that did not simply stick to the status quo of the Western genre. This film proved that there was more freedom to a genre if you only have the courage to pursue it.